Everyone, have you ever felt that unsettling space between you and someone you care about, where words don't flow easily, the connection feels lost, and no matter what you do, you just can't seem to bridge the emotional gap? When someone we care about becomes emotionally distant, our natural impulse is often to chase. We send more texts, initiate more conversations, ask more questions, and try harder to fix the problem. It comes from a place of love or anxiety. We want to reconnect, to feel close again. But what we often don't realize is that this chasing behavior can have the opposite effect. The more we pursue, the more the other person pulls away. The emotional distance grows wider, not smaller. That's why the first and most powerful step is to pause instead of pursuing. Pausing doesn't mean giving up or ignoring the problem. It means allowing space. Emotional space is not about silence or withdrawal. It's about creating room for reflection and breathing. When someone feels overwhelmed or disconnected, they often need time, not pressure, to sort through their feelings. If we keep reaching out, trying to explain ourselves or demand clarity, it can feel invasive. We might believe we're showing care, but it may come across as control or desperation. Attraction doesn't grow in a space that feels emotionally crowded. It grows in a space where both people feel free to choose each other, not push toward each other. The pause is an act of strength, not weakness. It says, I trust that if this relationship is meant to be close again, it will be. I respect your space enough not to intrude, and I respect myself enough not to beg. That kind of grounded energy is attractive. It shows confidence, patience, and emotional maturity. People are often drawn to those who can remain calm and centered even when things feel uncertain. When you pause, you break the cycle of anxious energy that may have been pushing the other person away. You give them a chance to feel your absence, not as a punishment, but as a reminder of your value and presence in their life. This pause also benefits you. It gives you time to step back from your own emotional urgency and ask deeper questions. Why does their distance trigger you so much? Are you afraid of abandonment? Are you seeking validation? Emotional chasing is often less about them and more about what we fear we'll lose. Pausing gives you a moment to return to yourself, to remember your worth, to stabilize your emotions without needing someone else to do it for you. This internal shift makes you more emotionally attractive because instead of being driven by fear, you start acting from self-awareness and inner balance. It's important to understand that emotional closeness cannot be forced. It has to be chosen. When someone is given the space to come back on their own terms, it makes the return more meaningful. They reconnect not because you dragged them back, but because they genuinely felt the desire to. That's the kind of connection that lasts. The pause creates room for longing, for thought, and for reconnection. Sometimes that space brings clarity, sometimes it brings closure. But either way, it brings truth. Pausing also breaks the power struggle. When both people are anxious or defensive, communication becomes reactive. But when one person steps back calmly, it resets the dynamic. You stop reacting to their withdrawal and start responding with presence. That change in energy is often what invites the other person to open up. They may start to wonder why you're not reacting the way they expected. Curiosity replaces tension, and curiosity, unlike pressure, opens the door to renewed attraction. In essence, pausing isn't passive. It's active patience. It's choosing your emotional posture with intention. Instead of rushing to close the gap, you trust that true connection doesn't come from force, it comes from mutual readiness. And readiness requires room. That room is created the moment you decide to stop chasing and simply allow things to unfold. When faced with emotional distance, it's easy to fall into the trap of reacting immediately. We feel a shift, a coldness, or a lack of engagement from someone we care about, and our instincts take over. We might send impulsive messages, demand explanations, or express our hurt in ways that come across as accusations. Reacting in the moment may feel like the only way to protect ourselves or reclaim the closeness we once felt. But more often than not, it pushes the other person even further away. The key to turning emotional distance into attraction lies not in these automatic reactions, but in the slower, quieter process of reflection. Reflection is the act of observing what is happening inside and outside of us without rushing to change it. It means resisting the urge to fill silence with noise or distance with pressure. When someone becomes distant, it usually has deeper roots than what we immediately perceive. It could be stress, fear, emotional overwhelm, or even confusion about their own feelings. But when we react, especially from a place of hurt or anxiety, we make the moment about our discomfort rather than trying to understand theirs. And that lack of understanding creates even more space between us. By choosing to reflect instead, we shift the focus inward. We ask ourselves, why is this distance affecting me so deeply? Am I feeling rejected, abandoned, or unseen? What story am I telling myself about this situation? These questions don't solve the problem right away, but they help us become aware of our emotional patterns. Maybe we realize that a fear of being left stems from past experiences, not just the current moment. Maybe we understand that our reaction is more about seeking control than seeking connection. In that awareness, we begin to diffuse the emotional charge that drives reactivity. Reflection also allows us to consider the other person's experience. Instead of jumping to conclusions like, they don't care about me or they're pulling away on purpose, we pause and ask, what might they be going through? Emotional distance is rarely about one person alone. It's often the result of unspoken needs, stress, insecurity, or disconnection on both sides. When we reflect, we begin to see the whole picture, not just our own part in it. That broader perspective helps us respond with compassion, not defensiveness. There is also power in delayed response. When we give ourselves time to reflect before we speak or act, our words become more intentional. We may choose to express concern instead of anger or curiosity instead of blame. Instead of saying, why are you ignoring me? We might say, I've noticed some distance lately. Are you okay? That difference in tone can completely shift the dynamic. It invites dialogue instead of defensiveness, and it signals emotional maturity, which is deeply attractive. Reflecting also helps us regulate our emotions. Emotional distance can trigger anxiety, and anxiety tends to make everything feel urgent. But not every emotional shift needs an immediate solution. Sometimes the healthiest response is no response, at least until we've sorted through our own feelings. Reacting from a dysregulated state usually creates more chaos. Reflecting allows us to calm our nervous system and approach the situation with a clearer, steadier mindset. This doesn't mean we ignore our feelings or suppress our pain. It means we take responsibility for understanding them before projecting them onto someone else. It means we show up with emotional clarity, which makes us feel safer and more grounded, not just to the other person, but to ourselves. That self-possession is magnetic. It communicates that while we care deeply, we're not dependent on others to stabilize our inner world. Choosing reflection over reaction creates space for insight, for healing, and for authentic reconnection. It breaks the cycle of emotional tug-of-war and opens the possibility for real understanding. And in that understanding, attraction naturally begins to grow again. Engaging with empathy means choosing to truly understand another person's experience without trying to control, fix, or judge it. When emotional distance appears in a relationship, it's often met with defensiveness, blame, or withdrawal. We feel rejected, hurt, or confused. And in those moments, it's easy to focus only on how we feel. But empathy asks us to take a different path. It invites us to step out of our own emotional storm long enough to see what might be going on in someone else's world. It doesn't mean ignoring our feelings. It means creating space for both sets of emotions to exist without competition. When someone is emotionally distant, it may be tempting to assume the worst. We might think they've stopped caring, or that we've done something wrong. We may even take their silence personally, interpreting it as a lack of love or interest. But the truth is, people often retreat emotionally, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to express what they're feeling, or they're overwhelmed by something internal. They may be protecting themselves, struggling with stress, or dealing with fears they can't put into words. Engaging with empathy allows us to hold that possibility in our minds instead of immediately assigning negative intent. Empathy requires listening, not just to what's said, but to what's unsaid. It means paying attention to changes in energy, body language, and behavior, and approaching those shifts with gentle curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of accusing someone of pulling away or asking what's wrong with you, an empathetic approach might sound like, I've noticed you seem more quiet lately. Is there something on your mind? That kind of question doesn't corner the other person. It invites them to share, to feel safe, and to open up in their own time. Sometimes empathy also means staying present even when the other person can't immediately give us what we need. That's not the same as tolerating disrespect or neglect. It's about understanding that emotional capacity fluctuates. Someone may need time to process their feelings before they can engage. If we can meet that need with patience rather than pressure, we become a source of comfort instead of another source of stress. That doesn't go unnoticed. People are naturally drawn to those who can hold emotional space without panic or control. Engaging with empathy also involves validating emotions without necessarily agreeing with them. You might not understand why someone is upset, or you might feel their withdrawal is unfair, but empathy says your feelings are valid because they're real to you, even if we don't fully understand them. That validation can soften defenses and reopen emotional doors. When people feel seen and understood, they're more likely to let their guard down. Empathy isn't about fixing feelings, it's about acknowledging them. What makes empathy powerful in emotionally distant moments is that it interrupts the cycle of defensiveness. When one person leads with empathy, the dynamic shifts. It says, I see you, I'm here, I'm not attacking you or demanding from you. I'm just trying to understand. That energy is disarming. It allows the other person to stop bracing for conflict and begin considering connection. It builds trust, even in tense situations. True empathy doesn't come from a place of strategy or manipulation. It comes from genuinely caring about the other person's experience, and in that authenticity lies its power. When we engage with empathy, we stop trying to pull someone closer and instead create a space they want to come back to. That invitation offered without force, spoken or unspoken, is often the spark that reignites attraction, not just emotionally but deeply and meaningfully. Reigniting emotional energy is about breathing life back into a connection that's grown stale, distant, or quiet. When emotional distance sets in, it often brings with it a heaviness, a sense of disengagement, silence, or routine that replaces the warmth and curiosity that once made the relationship feel alive. In order to transform that emotional gap into attraction again, we need to find ways to reintroduce energy, not chaos or drama, but emotional presence, tension, and playfulness that invite renewed interest and connection. Emotional energy doesn't always mean deep conversations or grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with something as simple as a smile that lingers a little longer, a playful tease, or a light touch that reminds the other person of your shared humanity and warmth. When we become emotionally distant from someone, interactions can start to feel flat or transactional. Everything becomes about logistics, responsibility, or unresolved conflict. What's missing is the spark, the unpredictable emotional dynamic that made being around each other feel exciting in the first place. Reigniting emotional energy means bringing that spark back in small, meaningful ways. One of the best ways to do this is by stepping out of the emotional script that's been playing on repeat. If every interaction feels like a replay of the same conversation or silence, then change the energy. Surprise them not with gifts, but with emotional variety. If things have been tense, bring in humor. If things have been cold, bring in warmth. If things have been serious, introduce something playful. Emotional contrast wakes people up. It disrupts the numbness that often comes with emotional distance and reawakens interest. Another important part of emotional energy is presence. True presence means giving someone your full attention without distraction or expectation. When we are emotionally distant, we may still be physically present, but mentally or emotionally, we're elsewhere. Reigniting energy means actually being there, making eye contact, listening actively, responding not just to words but to feelings. Presence signals that we value the moment and the person in front of us. That sense of being deeply seen and heard is profoundly attractive, and often missing when emotional distance has taken over. Emotional energy is also built through shared experiences. Routine and repetition often dull a relationship's spark. Doing something new together, even something small, can shift the energy. It might be a spontaneous walk, a night without phones, or revisiting a place that used to hold meaning. These experiences create emotional memory, which strengthens the bond and invites reconnection. They remind both people of what once brought them joy and why they were drawn to each other in the first place. It's important to note that emotional energy is not about pretending everything is fine. It's not about ignoring issues or covering up pain with surface-level gestures. It's about balancing the depth with lightness, being able to talk about serious things, but also remembering how to laugh, flirt, and enjoy each other. That balance creates emotional safety, and safety allows attraction to grow. When emotional energy is low, people often feel emotionally invisible. They don't feel desired, acknowledged, or emotionally nourished. By intentionally showing interest, offering compliments, showing affection, or simply engaging with enthusiasm, you communicate something powerful. I see you, and you matter to me. That emotional affirmation reignites a person's openness. It draws them back into the connection, often without needing to say a word about the distance itself. Reigniting emotional energy isn't about fixing the other person. It's about shifting the dynamic, bringing your own authentic energy forward in a way that's inviting, inspiring, and emotionally generous. When that energy is consistent, genuine, and safe, it becomes a magnet, not just for attention, but for real, meaningful connection. Being vulnerable without being needy is one of the most powerful emotional skills in any relationship. It requires a delicate balance, opening up about your feelings honestly, while still standing firmly in your own emotional stability. Vulnerability invites closeness, while neediness often pushes people away. When emotional distance appears, the instinct may be to cling, to over-explain, or to demand reassurance. But the more we seek to be filled by someone else, the more we communicate that we cannot hold ourselves. That energy isn't attractive, it's overwhelming. True connection happens when vulnerability is expressed with self-respect, not desperation. Vulnerability means saying, "This is what I feel. without expecting the other person to fix it or carry the weight of it. It's expressing sadness, disappointment, or longing without assigning blame. It might sound like, "I've been missing our connection lately. I value it, and it's been hard not feeling close." That kind of statement is clear, honest, and grounded. It opens a door for connection without pressuring the other person to walk through it. You are sharing your heart, but you're not making your worth or emotional survival dependent on their response. Neediness, on the other hand, tends to come from fear. It says, "I need you to act a certain way so I can feel okay." It often shows up as repeated checking in, emotional oversharing, or trying to gain reassurance through guilt or urgency. It might sound like, "Why don't you care about me anymore?" or "You never text me first." These statements don't invite openness, they trigger defensiveness or withdrawal. Instead of creating connection, they create emotional pressure, which increases distance. One of the key differences between vulnerability and neediness is internal grounding. Vulnerability comes from a place where you already know your emotions are valid. You're not asking someone to approve of your feelings, just to witness them. That sense of emotional ownership makes all the difference. When you share from that place, it gives the other person space to respond authentically, rather than feeling cornered. And when someone feels free, they're more likely to lean back in, not pull further away. Being vulnerable also means accepting that the other person might not respond the way you hope. They may need time, they may not know how to meet you emotionally in that moment. But that's okay. Vulnerability isn't about control, it's about truth. When you're not attached to the outcome, your sharing becomes a gift, not a demand. It creates a safe emotional space, one where the other person doesn't feel responsible for your happiness, but is still invited to share in your emotional world. It's also important to note that vulnerability isn't about exposing everything all at once. It's not about pouring out your emotions to someone who hasn't shown the capacity to receive them. Healthy vulnerability is intentional. It involves discernment. You reveal your feelings with honesty, but you choose moments and language that respect both your boundaries and theirs. You show emotion, but you also show emotional intelligence. This approach creates trust. It communicates that you're self-aware, emotionally available, and strong enough to hold both your own feelings and the uncertainty of someone else's. That kind of emotional presence is deeply attractive. It draws people in, not through pressure, but through authenticity. When someone sees that you're open yet secure, honest but not dependent, they feel safe to open up in return. Being vulnerable without being needy is a quiet kind of strength. It means you're willing to show your heart, knowing that you can handle whatever comes next. You're not seeking rescue, you're seeking connection. And in that space of grounded honesty, true emotional intimacy begins to grow. Honoring someone's timing is one of the most respectful and emotionally intelligent things you can do when facing emotional distance. When a person pulls away or needs space, it's often because they are overwhelmed, confused, or navigating their own inner world. The instinct to close that gap quickly, to demand answers, to push for resolution, or to restore connection immediately can be strong, especially when we feel vulnerable or uncertain. But healing, clarity, and emotional readiness cannot be rushed. When you honor someone's timing, you show that you care not just about reconnecting, but about their emotional process. That patience alone can rebuild attraction more powerfully than any forceful effort to reconnect. Emotional closeness must be mutual and chosen, not coerced. People are drawn to those who can respect their autonomy, especially in moments of confusion or withdrawal. When you give someone space without punishment, pressure, or guilt, you communicate emotional security. You send the message, "I trust you to find your way back in your own time, and I trust myself enough not to chase you." That kind of emotional stance radiates strength, not indifference. It says you are available, but not desperate. You care, but you're not trying to control. The reality is that everyone has their own rhythm when it comes to emotional processing. Some people need time to think before they talk. Others require solitude to feel safe enough to re-engage. When we ignore or disrespect that timing, we usually get resistance instead of closeness. Even well-meaning attempts to connect can feel like pressure when someone is not ready. But when you step back calmly and hold space, you create an environment where the other person can process their feelings without fear of judgment or intrusion. This doesn't mean passively waiting forever or silencing your own needs. It means recognizing the difference between inviting and insisting. It means being available when they're ready without hovering while they're not. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just your presence, your steadiness, and your trust in their ability to return when they're ready. And if they don't, you still have your peace because you didn't compromise your dignity or emotional boundaries trying to force something before it's time. Honoring their timing also gives you the opportunity to reflect. While they are taking their space, you can take yours. You can ask yourself whether you've been seeking connection from a place of fear or clarity, whether your expectations are fair, and whether the relationship dynamic has been reciprocal or one-sided. You get to check in with your own emotional timing too, because sometimes we chase people not because they're right for us, but because we fear being alone or rejected. Their space becomes a mirror, allowing you to see yourself more clearly. Attraction thrives in freedom, not pressure. When someone knows they can come back to you without punishment, interrogation, or emotional chaos, they are more likely to do so willingly. They return not because they feel obligated, but because they feel safe. And that safety is magnetic. It tells them that you are emotionally mature, that you don't collapse under emotional uncertainty, and that you respect their individuality. Timing is deeply personal. What feels like distance to one person might be the space another needs to breathe. When you honor that space, you allow something genuine to emerge. You let the connection be real, not rushed. You let the other person choose you, not out of fear or guilt, but from a place of clarity. And when someone chooses you freely, after having had the time to truly think and feel, the connection is deeper, more sustainable, and far more meaningful.